Have you guys ever wondered what happens at the Oscars when we're all watching ads? I think we just experienced a little bit of that, and we'll have that on and off all the next 3 days. So thanks for coming back into the room, and thanks for you online joining in. So to start off, big ideas, big thinker, and just a really inspiring speaker. This is Billy Almon.
Greetings, people of Earth. We are here live and online. So happy to be here with you all. Very quickly, this is going to be a very interactive session. So just calmly and politely turn to the person next to you and very gently say, "I might breathe on you." Okay, I need to see that. I need to see it. You guys got to get comfortable. You guys are going to get really intimate over the next couple of days. As you might have seen, my title is that of an astrobiofuturist. I'll talk about that in a minute, but we're here to talk about creating pathways for life through nature-inspired models. And so the work that I do as an astrobiofuturist is really looking at the intersection, like many of you here, of space exploration, of biomimicry, and what I refer to as human connection design, which is about connecting humans to humans, humans to the natural world, and humans to ideas around progress through empathy. And a big part of the work that I do is really about challenging the core assumptions about the future in order to discover the unexpected solutions for challenges on Earth and in space. And a big part of how I do that is through storytelling. There's really three things that I like to organize these buckets into. There's the narrative framing of the challenge. There's exploring the biological models. And then what I really love to do is ask what can happen when. And so we are going to go through this process together, and we are going to have some fun doing it. Just to give you guys a little bit more background on myself, I am a huge nerd from the 90s. Okay, 10 points for the online participants who can name everyone in this photo. Okay, let's get them involved as well. So I'm a big nerd. These were a lot of my heroes growing up, a lot around space. I was raised on the White Sands Missile Range, where a lot of the early testing for rocketry took place. So this is kind of embedded subconsciously in my mind from a youth. And in tandem with that is my background working for Walt Disney Imagineering, where for almost 15 years, I served in the capacity of looking out into the future, 10, 20, 30 years, and dreaming up what might be possible depending on some of the technology trends, social, societal trends, and environmental as well. But the thing that grounds all of my work is really an experience I had back in 2006, following the aftermath of the natural and man-made disaster, which was Hurricane Katrina's impact on the Gulf Coast. I was a young architecture student at the time, and having the opportunity to visit New Orleans after the waters had receded, I saw the devastation firsthand. And as a Black man and as a student of design and architecture, I was left with a lot of questions around, how do we prevent this from happening from a social justice perspective, from an equity and inclusion perspective, and from a sustainability and infrastructure perspective. So this work, this conversation around transforming transportation is very near and dear to me. And through kind of looking for answers to those questions, I came across this quote from Albert Einstein of looking deep into nature will allow you to understand everything better. And like many of you, that led me to biomimicry. And so through this work, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of different things, a lot of cool things. Shout out to Henry there in the middle, who I met in 2017 and put a snake on my head. One of my favorite memories of all time, because I was terrified. The last time I was here, I was sharing about opportunities to transform space modules into immersive environments that can elicit a lot of the psychological benefits we get from being immersed in space. But today, we're talking about transportation, okay? So in terms of framing the narrative, what I love to do is really kind of look at the words that we're using to really kind of peel back some opportunities even in how we're talking about things. And this, again, comes from that storytelling perspective of using narrative as a way to challenge the schema of how our brains process information and form patterns. And so transformare is the Latin root of transformation. Trans meaning beyond, formare meaning to form or to shape. And so going beyond the shape of something and also the larger idea being to change in composition, change in shape, and to metamorphose. I love that word. That's what we're going to do while we're here. Metamorphose, transportation. In transportation, the root word transport coming from Latin as well, trans, again, beyond, and porto, meaning to carry. So carrying across or carrying beyond. We're going to go beyond that. We're going to transform the idea of carrying things beyond, with transportation itself primarily being focused on the movement of goods and persons from place to place. We're going to go beyond that. We're going to transform that in this place. And so as we talk about the future of transportation, for me in this talk, I'm actually going to be focusing on the car. So quick demographic pop quiz. Who is familiar with Hanna-Barbera? Okay, just checking. Just making sure I know who I'm talking to. Now, of these two shows, of the Flintstones and the Jetsons, show of hands, and people online, I want you to chime in as well. Which of these is your preferred model for the future of transportation? This is a serious question. Okay, so show of hands for those who think that Fred Flintstone's footmobile is actually a great model for the future of transportation. I got two. Can I get three? I see five. I see five, six, 7. Okay, 7 of you. Wow, I thought it'd be higher. This is locally resourced materials. Come on, this is zero emissions. Okay, you're probably getting 10 miles per hour downhill in this thing, right? Okay, now show of hands for those of you who think the Jetsons is actually a better model for the future of transportation. Interesting. Oh my goodness. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there's maybe some fuel efficiencies with that. It's very adaptable. It's very robotic. Very interesting. I thought it'd be more 50-50. What was
that path of the Flintstones and a couple by?
Interesting. Okay, so everyone here prefers the flying, and everyone online is rocking with the Flintstones. That's very interesting.
Why they're not here.
So that's hilarious. I actually think that what we're looking for, the model for the future of transportation, is actually somewhere slightly in the middle. And I do think that the future of the automobile is, the elephant is a great model for that, and we'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's talk about cars. I want to frame up this conversation around the exploration that I'm looking for us to do in a little bit. So, interesting thing about cars, even amidst the pandemic, 79.1 million cars were produced globally last year alone. Of that 79.1 million, 9.2 million cars were produced in the United States last year alone. I am hailing from the ancestral lands of the Chumash that was renamed to Burbank, California, and want to acknowledge a lot of the ancestral people that have resided here, the Erie among them, and many others that, because I don't want to mispronounce their name, I will not name them, but I wanted to acknowledge them nonetheless. So hailing from California, there's 14.2 million registered vehicles as of 2019. That number has increased along with the production of cars. And again, in LA County, which is where I'm hailing from, across LA County, surface lots occupy 101 square miles, which is the equivalent of about 4 Manhattans as parking lots, which is about 14% of the surface area in LA County. That's a lot of parking. And especially when you contextualize this around the car, which is what we're going to talk about. So, typical car range, the height is around, 5 feet. The width is about 6 feet, the length about, close to 15 feet. By contrast, elephants are slightly bigger, depending on which type of elephant you're talking about. But when you look at the weight of elephants versus the weight of cars, they're in the same weight class, plus or minus, a couple tons. And it's in comparing the automobile to a large land animal that things really start to get interesting for this idea of transforming transportation. Especially when you consider the idea, and this is the reframing part, that the car is a roaming piece of real estate. When you think of the automobile as a roaming piece of real estate, and you think about it in terms of a square footage that could be used for many things, it really, really highlights a lot of, I think, opportunities. So the average car has about 90 to 100 square feet of, in my opinion, prime real estate. And what's interesting is we use our cars about 5% of the time that we have them. So imagine having a piece of real estate that you do nothing with 95% of the time that you have it. And this is where I think we have a lot of really great opportunities to explore things, especially when you consider that a garden to feed someone annually, it is recommended, needs about 200 square feet. So about half the size, you can basically 6 months worth of living, on the same kind of real estate footprint. Now, there's a lot of different trends that I think can help frame a lot of this conversation, whether that's talking about artificial intelligence empowered computer aided design, 3D printing, in terms of industrial printing, the whole concept of parametric and generative design, automation, the electric vehicle proliferation that we're starting to see, advances in robotics, machine learning, climate change as another contextualizing framework, and also space exploration. All of these things, I think, have what I refer to as blips on the horizon that can help paint a picture of how we can reimagine this idea of transportation. Specifically, I wanted to call out robotics, both hard robotics and soft robotics, as areas of opportunity. A lot of what you're seeing here is work that was done by NASA around how do we rethink this idea of adaptive mobilization. Shout out to the triathlete here at the bottom, one of my favorite future vehicles that we will be driving around it. I believe it. I'm hoping for it. And then on the right, what you're seeing is work that was done in concert between MIT and BMW to explore this idea of inflatable interiors. Imagine all of the spaces that we can recoup when the very idea of us having seats inside a vehicle that don't always need to be there becomes a possibility. So between that and a lot of the explorations around inflatable and expandable design taking place at NASA, there's a lot of opportunity to really reimagine the future of cars, especially with, again, this invention and replication of the EV, electric vehicle skateboard that's taking place in a lot of the configurations that's popping up out of this technology that we're seeing a lot of companies start to adapt. So this is where we start to get to the fun part, in my opinion, where we get to ask fun questions. So what can happen when we go beyond cars serving primarily one function, and that function being the transport of humans back and forth? What happens when they can become more? And when we put this in the context of our current climate crisis, there is an imperative for us to use more of our real estate for things like the recovery of lost habitats, reducing the heat island effect. Is there ways that we can use our vehicles to combat a lot of the wildfires that we're specifically experiencing in the Pacific West, and all these other issues? And so that is the framing, and now we are going to explore the biology, specifically that of pachyderms. Now, when I talk about the future of automobiles being elephants, I'm not talking about the ways that we have traditionally seen elephants be used as transport, and in some areas that they are still being used. This is not specifically what I'm talking about. What I'm referencing more so is, again, elephants as a model specifically as an ecological model for having vehicles serve ecological functions and purpose beyond just transport. So there's five kind of cool things about elephants that I want to talk to you all about. And the first being that elephants, they serve as engineers. You might have heard them be referred to as ecosystem engineers, and that is a very apt description for them. When elephants travel through forests, they literally knock over trees. In so doing, they uproot tree bottoms, which helps to aerate soil. And the trees that they choose to eat, the trees that they choose to strip bark from, in knocking over and demolishing those trees, they actually allow larger trees to continue to grow in the forest, and those larger trees actually help to sequester more carbon than the trees that they consume. So they are literally engineering the landscape to help sequester more carbon. Not only that, but their, I don't know how many of you all had breakfast, but their droppings, elephant dung, is actually a great fertilizer. There's a lot of really rich nutrients in their droppings that other animals will eat, not just dung beetles, all different types of animals. And the interesting thing about this is that the bark that elephants eat helps with their digestion, and it actually helps with the seed's germination process. So it really, it's cool stuff. This is a Rafflesia flower. It's one of the largest flowers in the world, and elephants actually serve as pollinators for this. So the seeds for this actually get stuck in their toes in East Asia, and as they're walking through the jungle, they actually help to pollinate and disperse seeds. Elephants actually are the largest seed dispersal system in the natural world. And there's also a type of elephant, it's not a different species, but a different type of elephant that is referred to as a desert elephant. These elephants can go longer without water, and one of the things that allows them to do that is in their throat, they have what's called a pharyngeal pouch. It's actually like a pocket of a gallon of water that they can go into and splash and cool themselves down with when they're in really arid and hot places. So they also serve as preservation and conservation systems in and of themselves as it relates to water. And what you're seeing in the far right, that is my footprint, my 12-foot shoe right there to give you context for how large this female elephant's footprint is. And the interesting thing about this is their footprints serve as habitats for many microinvertebrates. So there's been over 60 different types of species that have been found living in the footprints of elephants. And when you think again about these 6,000 to 13,000 pound animals going through a place looking for water, they excavate water with their trunk. They can smell water sources really well. Their large brains remember everything, so they remember where water sources are. And when they are rummaging through places digging up water in mass, they actually create the watering holes that all other animals come to because of their sheer size and compacted explorations in the dirt. And so they also, from their trampling through different forests, they also serve as a wildfire prevention system because a lot of the grass that can easily catch on fire, they are actually trampling as they're walking through areas or they're eating it. So preserving and fostering biodiversity is another great ecological service that these amazing pachyderms do. And the last thing that I thought was really, really interesting is in the framing of the life of an elephant. When an elephant dies in the wild, they release 6 million calories back into ecosystems. Now, for context, 6 million calories could feed a human being for about 8 years. So that's a lot of calories that they're servicing back into the economy of the ecosystem, ecological economies. And by contrast, I thought it was interesting that there's about 30,000 different individual parts in a automobile, of which 70 to 80% are recyclable. But when you think about that 79.1 million number of cars produced last year alone, that 25 to 25% is really magnified. So let's talk about the possibilities of what can happen if we were to, through the advancements of technology, rethink how a car can serve as an ecological service. What can happen when we take them and we model them after elephants? So this is where I want to open it up. I want to hear what's going on. How are we? We're good on time and everything? Okay, great. I want to open up the floor, okay? I want to hear from you, the people. What do you think? What can happen when cars foster growth and can incubate life? And the incubate life part, just to frame it up a little bit more, elephants gestate their pregnancies for about 20 months. So, you know, the babies, 20 months is a long time. It's almost 2 years of having a baby. Okay, now I don't know anything about what that's like, but I do have 2 kids, and I can tell you that's a long time. Okay. And what I thought was interesting about that is what scientists have discovered is that part of the reason why that period is so long is so that when baby elephants are born, they're born with all of the knowledge they need to live successfully. Like right out the bat, they're walking and they're sniffing for water. And so this idea of the car as something that can hold or foster life or incubate or, you know, microgreens in my mind comes to mind. You know, the idea of taking a vertical farm and literally having a highway forest that is incubating these nutrients that can be used in a myriad of ways is something that sparks my imagination. But I want to hear from you all. I'm going to go through a series of questions. I want you all to think about these things, okay? I'm going to just go through it, pose some questions to you all, and then I want to hear what you all think. And it's this framing of what can happen when that is where the discoveries, the unexpected discoveries tend to pop up. We're not focusing on the technology. This is not about the technology. This is about the possibilities and what impact we would like to chase as we look at the future of transforming transportation. So that being one question, another that comes to mind is this idea of what can happen when energy isn't the only resource cars can store and share. What if you could feed your car your food waste and your car was a composter? What if your car could collect rainwater, right? You know, the average car holds a 20-gallon tank for gas. What if there was a 20-gallon reservoir that you could have for, depending on where you are, collection of rainwater? What could you use when you have 79 million gallons of water potentially stored in a city, in a location? Or, you know, that number, you know, numbers like that. Okay. Again, so another question, what can happen when we take that idea of this storage system that is mobile and we explore parking garages as becoming hubs for natural resources and habitats for wildlife and pollinators where you can store water and this mulch that you've created? What do our parking lots become? If you think of a parking lot, it's like a big depressing concrete block, right? That 95% of the time, your car's not paying your taxes, you know, and it's just sitting there, okay? Like even a dog, when they're just chilling, right? They can look around, they can sniff around for stuff, dog's not the best example now that I think about it, but it does stuff is my point. So what do our parking garages become when we have this ecological roaming service that can provide and distribute and share resources? And then when you zoom out even further, what can happen when this idea of herd intelligence is applied to how we drive, where just to talk about herds, they are matriarchal. The oldest female becomes the matriarch, and a big part of that is all of the knowledge that they have of where resources are and the knowledge about the environment around them, right? So we have swarm intelligence that's becoming a part of this conversation around transportation. What if we add another layer of that, of this kind of empathetic level of intelligence that elephants have? And what I thought was most interesting about this is that the oldest elephant, who is the matriarch, sets the pace of how quickly or slowly the herd goes, and they also set the direction. And so what happens if we can tap into the intelligence that older cars have around the experience of being on the road? How can we optimize the progression of a vehicle in how we are thinking of the future of designing our highways and other transportation systems? And then what can happen when we explore this idea of wildlife crossings? We were talking about the Wright brothers earlier and their bicycle enthusiasts. One of the most interesting facts that I came across in this presentation was the fact that it was not the invention of the automobile that drove the development of roads being paved. It was rich bicyclists who wanted to show off and hated driving over rocks and stubble. So we don't need where we're going, we don't need roads, okay? Who got it? Okay, good, a couple of y'all, great. So what happens when we reform our thinking even around how we're designing our roadways? Can we go back to natural pathways that, again, can help with things like the heat island effect in certain areas? Thinking about all the tires that are being designed with Goodwill and JAXA and all of the lunar lander tires and all of those things. You know, do we need the same concepts, these core ideas around how a car is made? Do we need those as we go forward into the future? And can we use all of these different technologies that we're developing to go back to a more natural landscape where we're actually giving back a lot of the territories that we've split by putting a road in of these natural organisms? And so when we zoom out further to the level of a city, what happens when you have all of this biological servicing going on? You know, how do we rethink this idea of the city as a place that is inside of a forest rather than a place that we have to make room for ourselves? And how do we further integrate ourselves through this idea? So, Britt, I want to see what people online have and give you all in the audience time to think about these questions of what can happen when, and then I want to hear from you all as well.
So we have a bunch of questions from the online chat, or statements, both of them. So first, Jacqueline says, first question, they could generate food for something else to sustain life. It's a great one, right? Diego mentioned that it could reduce land transportation's environmental footprint, which is correct. Christopher said, I imagine anti-cars, cars that reduce emissions with usage, that positively utilize natural waste rather than creating it. Cars that don't become obsolete so quickly. There's so many.
give me two more, and then I'm going to...
Okay. So we have Marjan, live and work in the same city, no car. Implement carless Sundays. Let people experience quiet. Elephants take breaks too. This would be the biggest jumps in evolution come from changes in the process rather than tweaking an element, moving into a new niche.
Awesome. About that, elephant takes a break too. So 55% of the time that elephants are alive, during the 55% of their day, they're eating, right? Versus the 95% of the time cars aren't doing anything. I just thought that was interesting. Questions, thoughts, concerns? No concerns, just questions.
I just thought about making them modular so they can be reconfigured to be multifunctional and work together, or be able to be broken apart depending on what the task demanded.
I love that. I thought I had a slide to hear about that. I think modularity is a big part of how we need to design everything, actually, more cellular. I know there's going to be a lot of conversations around that to come, so I'm excited to hear from others who are diving deeper into that. Thank you.
It puts into question the very idea of transportation. We have phones, we call them phones, but they're not really phones anymore. They've taken on this new life, and I'm not going to say I'm advocating for everything that a phone can do now, but the idea that a car, we can call it a car, but the idea of what is it doing, do we need it, do we need transportation the way we've conceived of it? And so this makes me think of, we shouldn't even call it a car anymore. We call it something else. It's going to serve a whole new function. So I don't know. My brain's thinking a lot, and I'm not sharing it well. But
no, you are. So that's great. And this is my last slide, and then I want to hear from more online and everyone here. But when you think about the car as an organism, this thing that's moving around just as an organism. The fact that it only serves one function makes it a not very good organism. There's nothing that's living that is singularly function. The function of the cars, primarily as an economic instrument, is to move people from one place to another. 79.1 million of those last year. But when you zoom out and you think of all the other resources that go into making and producing one car, think about the amount of lithium that we're about to mine as we try to build more cars to replace the cars that we already have. All of these additional resources for something that only does one thing is why I think that there's this opportunity to reimagine through technology what can be possible and what other offerings we can bake into it. And so just very quickly, there's a lot of different examples of transporting that takes place in nature. Some of that is relationships. The kangaroo and the monkey come to mind. A lot of that migrations are a transporting that is actually tapping into natural cycles and systems that are being leveraged by organisms to transport themselves. Chasing the rain kind of comes to mind. The circulatory systems also serve in a lot of ways as transport systems for our bodies and other types of organisms. Many other explorations that I could go on and on and on about, but I'm happy to talk to you all individually further about this should you be interested. Having said that, do we still have time for a couple of questions? Okay, okay. So yeah, let's talk. What you got?
Speaking on behalf of people who are working to conserve elephants, just this attachment here is another significant value that can be placed in a community of people who generally say, yeah, when it comes to conserving wildlife on another continent. But this would be quite meaningful. The other thing I wanted to do is to paint a picture, because the Living Planet Index clearly indicates that from 1970 to 2020, we lost 68% of monitored, measured vertebrate animal populations across the planet. So the strength here is looking at how to get something that we as humans are enumerating much faster than wildlife is able to manifest in a way that can actually benefit the planet. And with the loss of 68% of monitored vertebrate populations and elephants, as the example, being currently critically endangered in every environment they're in, I would love to see this exploded much more widely than even here, by, for example, being pitched to 96 elephants and a variety of other locations that have the ability to amplify the idea and join the effort.
I love that. Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Hey, Billy, I wanted to unpack a little bit more about what you were saying initially about the footprint, and then kind of the natural roads, and realizing that thinking of the roads themselves as a part of this ecological imprint of the elephants. Like, we see how much ecosystem engineering they do just by their activity, what if we start thinking of the roads as an extension of the cars too, and how those can serve as many functions that way, promoting certain kinds of life or ecosystem, value.
I love that question. This is not a planted question. I had cut out a part of the presentation that was just on roads and the development of roads, because again, just from someone who's living in California, where you could like see the smog, right? Like it's like, oh, this guy's great today. What I thought was interesting was that a lot of times we focus on the emissions from cars, and we don't think about the emissions and the toxicity that comes from asphalt, especially as it pertains to wildlife. And so there's a lot of things around the idea of reimagining the road and how we make them that I think is also an opportunity as well. So thank you for saying that.
The thought process, I love the idea that, not the idea, but what you presented about as the elephant goes through life, the things it interacts with and the things it changes, what it leaves behind versus what it's picking up. My challenge, I guess, is we're designing vehicles with fewer emissions. What's the next step? Can the vehicles then become cleaners? Can we start to look at that idea that what they could pick up, could they use, could they process? And I think that idea of the road too is a big part of that. Is it filtration? Is it, I don't know. Great ideas here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that was the intent. Again, challenging those schema around how we think of cars, hard-bodied, always a certain size and length, no adaptability to their environment whatsoever. Hopefully this opened up some ideas for you all about the future and more questions. Yes, more? Oh yes, online. I can riff. I got like 30 more slides.
We're gonna give you guys a controversial in here.
Okay.
I like that. So getting out of the city, being on the edge, and being able to easily escape is so important to so many people. How might this approach facilitate and embrace this?
Being on the edge of the city. Can you read it one more time?
Getting out of the city, being on the edge, and able to easily escape is so important to so many people.
Yes.
Right? So how might this approach facilitate and embrace this?
I think one of the core things that I was looking to explore with this was how do you make cars a local source as well, right? And so that's why, for me, I framed this conversation, this exploration around California as a specific place that has specific examples of how using a reimagined vehicle could service California. And I think when you look at a car as a local ecosystem, ecological service provider, I think that's where, I was going to save this for our panel, but there's about 400 different models of cars that are currently produced in the world, 400 different types, different models. There's about 25 different types, sedan, truck, SUV, et cetera, right? There's a lot of cars that are being made. If we could reduce that, and maybe the idea of having these types and these models formed around natural local ecosystems, then I think you can take this idea, because the core idea is the car as an ecological service. I used elephants. I'm partial to elephants. I just love elephants. So when I was invited, I knew what I was going to talk about right away. But I think the idea of looking to natural local models for this idea of reimagining transport allows itself to be applied to city or rural or urban.
I have an answer to that.
Yes.
This is the urban planner in me coming out. What if we didn't have to escape? What if where we are and how we get around is all a nice, really nice place to be, and we don't have to escape? So there you go.
That part. Thank you for saying that, because that is, that was essentially the idea, right? Like, I know there's a lot of conversations around the idea of rewilding and how to best go about doing that. I believe there is a way to do it. And I believe that is exactly what the planet is telling us it needs. And so I think that's it. Like, we are escaping to nature because the way that we've designed cities, we've literally gotten rid of the nature part and so now we're trying to chase the thing that we're getting rid of. I think, thank you. That was the answer.
So we got about 5 more minutes.
Okay. All right. I wasn't going to show this, but since we have 5 minutes, there's a theory that the ancestors of elephants, the mastodons and the mammoths, are actually what helped lead humans out of the continent of Africa. Again, because they were making way, they were clearing paths, they were also, theorized to be essentially chasing food as they navigated. And so, in my mind, that was actually one of the core things that started this exploration, was this idea of, is it possible for elephants to also guide us into another frontier of how we're looking at transportation? And so I just wanted to share this because I did this and I was like, I'm not going to use this. But this idea of an astromastodon, okay? Clearly, right? The evidence is present. But, the idea that, again, taking inspiration from the triathlete and thinking of, elephants as infrastructure tools as we are expanding the roaming of these planets, and as we're looking to establish communities and settlements. This idea of taking the triathlete and adding some of these functions that we see with elephants in terms of the tusk, which serve essentially as forklifts, and a robotic armature to clear some debris, also look for water, drill, all of these different infrastructural needs that those traveling to the red planet will need came to mind. This one, I think I accidentally didn't delete one of them, but this was inspired by some of the rovers that are being explored. Cruising on Mars. Yeah, I shouldn't have shown this one. I should have just left it with the last one. But yeah, so the astromastodon is what the people of Mars are going to need. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you got a question? We have.
Oh.
Hey.
Oh.
All right.
Would like a comment. Yes. I think it's an excellent idea. So you mentioned like only 5% of time the cars are used. So I'm thinking maybe car can be multifunctionalized as a hospital, for example. Every day spend a small amount of time in the car, get some health check on. That maybe is a multifunctionalization to make new use of cars. Yeah. Healthcare is a big issue. Yeah.
I think so. I think between the inflatable technologies that are being developed, and again, 3D printing, I mean, turtle shells come to mind in terms of like how you can keep it safe and all that. But I think it's those opportunities, like you just mentioned, between that and, not to say that it can replace the housing issue, because there's a lot of, housing is a multifaceted issue. But the idea of an inflatable home, I think there's a lot of opportunities where we just get out this idea of the box on wheels. So totally agree with you. Thank you.
Okay, last call for in the room. And Britt, any interesting questions online or comments?
They're saying great job, Billy.
Oh, nice. Nice.
It's always nice to hear.
The beginning.
Awesome. Yes.
Great.
It is.
Great. It is the beginning. All right. Thank you very much. Let's give him a hand. Thank you, Diane. Thanks, Claire. All right. As promised, it's about 10:15. We will start again right at 10:30. We'll hear about, we've gone from big ideas, we're going to hear about a practical and futuristic train. We're going to switch gears from cars to trains. And you'll notice this rhythm, I hope, throughout the next few days. Big ideas to practical applications, and research that's being done. So, all right, thank you. We'll be back at 10:30.